watching this video, it is probably because you've got a bad timing chain. Now, if you don't know if you have a bad timing chain or not, let me show you one really key indicator to whether or not it's on its way out. That is timing chain slop, like that. That is way excessive, ladies and gentlemen. So stick around and we will show you step by step how to get this thing replaced. Not too bad, guys. You can do it in the car and it's not a horrible job. It's pretty accessible, and just a couple of little tricks will get it knocked out pretty quick.
Okay guys, when doing this job, there is one thing you have to be absolutely certain of, and that is that there are no freaking timing marks. That's right, this is such a weird design. No timing marks, no dowels that hold the crank gear or the cam sprockets in place, nothing. It is all done willy-nilly. Just do it however you want. No, just kidding. Okay, let me show you how this what Ford's thought process is behind this engine. Yeah, I said Ford because it's made by Fomoco. So if we look in here, I have it at TDC right now, but there are no marks indicating that whatsoever. That little mark right there, I don't know what the heck he's there for. No marks on the intake camshaft. Down below, no marks down here. What we do have, if you look here, is there's a special tool that I have inserted. It's that little black tip right there. If you look really closely, it's pressing on the crankshaft. As you rotate it, clockwise, it stops against that, and you can't turn it anymore. That's what holds the crank from spinning and puts the crank in TDC. Now there is a little mark right here on that sprocket. No clue what he actually is supposed to line up with, and also keep in mind it's not pinned in any way, so it doesn't matter. Here is the crank tool. It came with the Dorman part number. I'll include it on the screen right now. The sprocket, the intake phaser and sprocket came with this tool, and as you watch, it screws right in. You just do hand tight, it holds the crank. Up top you'll see I have removed the high pressure fuel pump and the housing that it bolts up to. It bolts to the back of the head right here, and you can see a slot inside of this camshaft here and a slot inside of that camshaft there. Also included in the phaser kit is this Dorman part number, which basically lines up with those two slots. Let me come like this. It's easier to do with my right hand for some reason. And there it goes. Now the cams are locked into position. The best way to do this is to first, initially doing this job, take your valve cover off. Rotate your crankshaft without taking the timing cover off or undoing that sprocket down there. Before you take anything apart down below, stick a screwdriver in cylinder number 1 spark plug hole and rotate it till it comes up to the top, and also so that both intake and exhaust lobes are pointing at about a 45 degree in towards each other. If you look, you can see them there. That is what they should look like. So once you get to that position, then you're roughly at TDC. Then you can take the harmonic balancer off and start this procedure with the dowel pin locking it on the crank and the Dorman plastic alignment tool for the camshafts up there. Don't do anything before you do that, or you might end up bending a valve. On the underside of the car, we are going to start by removing the serpentine belt. Something to make that a little bit easier is there's a bracket right here that holds the power steering lines to the frame. Just undo the 10mm bolts and kind of push those up and out of the way so you can get better access to the 14mm tensioner bolt. And you're going to rotate clockwise to relieve the tension on the belt. And you can see right here, I'm just gonna fish it off of this tensioner pulley and release the tension. Now, if you look, should, in theory, be able to get it off of the crankshaft. And there we go. And off the alternator and the water pump and the AC compressor.
And this should finagle out. All done from underneath, not too bad.
The easiest way to figure out if you're at TDC is with this little hole right here. That hole lines up with a threaded hole in the timing cover that can help you to kind of lock it into TDC. You'll also be able to tell that it's TDC because your crank sensor will be lined up with the 20th tooth, which sometimes is marked with a white or yellow paint mark. If it's not, basically count your teeth. There's an opening, and you're going to count backwards from that opening counterclockwise 20 teeth. 20 teeth to there. And that puts you at TDC, and you know that you're right on the money. You'll also be able to tell it's TDC by up top. You'll have the valve cover off. So take the valve cover off. Don't loosen your harmonic balancer bolt. And you will be able to look down in the cylinder and see that it is up at the top on cylinder number 1. You can also put a screwdriver in there to check. And both of your camshafts will be at about a 45 on cylinder number 1. Both your intake and exhaust, as you see there. So first things first, get her to TDC.
Next, we're going to want to remove the harmonic balancer. That is a 21 millimeter socket. I'm using an impact to get this off a little easier. Plug your ears. Just like that, pretty easy work. If you are fighting this bolt, they make weighted sockets. And I will show you a standard socket and a weighted one. So here we have a standard socket right here. And then we have a weighted socket. Look at this big mamma jamma right there. 8 millimeter bolts holding the crank trigger on. Sometimes I like putting bolts back where they came from. That way it's less things I have to bag and tag. Less things I have to remember where they went. The belt tensioner is two 12 millimeter sockets. One last thing that's going to be easier doing down here on the bottom is removing this idler right here. It is a 10 millimeter. Get yourself a nice ratcheting wrench and break her loose. Man, this is a long friggin' bolt. Jeez Louise. That only took a year and a half. Look at that thing. What were they thinking? Is that really necessary? These water pump pulleys are also 10s, and oh, they are going to be a trick to undo. So, in order to get the water pump off, I use this little setup right here. It is a strap wrench and my ratcheting 10 millimeter box wrench, and up in the car, it works like a dream. Another thing I want to show is the fact that I basically get almost all, but I think the last 2 bolts up at the top of the timing cover from underneath. I do it with a combination of this little ratchet right here, a really long gear wrench ratchet that I love, comes in handy a lot for this kind of stuff, and my electric ratchet with the wobble 8 millimeter. Now these are all going to be 8 millimeters. There's one 12 millimeter right here. Now we're going to set the car down and put a block of wood underneath a jack stand or a jack so that we can support this engine and do the rest of the work from the top. Okay, now that we got the car back down close to the ground, got our block of wood underneath the oil pan, we are now ready to take this upper motor mount off. And we've got two 17 millimeter bolts that hold it on right here. And don't pay too much attention to this motor mount. It's an aftermarket one the customer has on. Yours might look a little different. Now all we should need to do is take the two 17s off down on the frame rail side. A long extension with a 17 millimeter socket will get the motor mount bolts on the frame rail. And now it should be able to lift out just like so. And that shows you our bolt locations. Boom, 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 boom. 12mm bolts right here that hold this idler pulley on. Make sure you get those out. And we have one remaining 8mm on this side and one on this side. And these three 12mm that hold what would be the motor mount into the side of the head. With all of the bolts out, we should be able to give this thing a nice gentle pry, and it should start wiggling. Now if it doesn't pop off easily like that, you still have bolts in, so be careful. I put very little pressure and that just popped right off, guys. See that? And there it goes. And out she comes. Ba-boom! Timing chain accessible.
We have two 10mm bolts that hold the tensioner on. One there and one there. Once we get the tensioner off, we can then remove the left-hand side guide for the chain. After that, remove the two 8mm nuts that hold the right side guide on. One at the bottom and one right here. And that will give you plenty of slack in your chain. Then you should be able to start working the chain off the bottom, because that sprocket is not keyed and not bolted, and just slide it back this way and get your chain off. After that, we'll get into these cam sprockets once we get there. Okay, we have removed the chain, and I want to show just a couple of tricks. Down below, you're going to have to get this oil pump sprocket off of the oil pump. Now it wants to free spin, and you're gonna fight it like crazy. It's a little 10mm and it's torqued to like about 20 foot-pounds, but it feels like it's torqued to 1,000,000. So take yourself a punch or a pin and run it through one of these holes and have it catch the back of the pump housing. Be careful not to break it. I did kind of deform the metal a little bit there, but it was what we had to do to get it off. So now that we got everything off and cleaned, we're ready to get these camshafts off real quick. Now that both sprockets are off, you can see I have cleaned these surfaces with brake clean and a really clean rag so that they are ready to receive the new sprockets. Here is the timing chain set that we are using from Cloy's, and it comes with almost everything you need except for the washer and the intake sprocket. We've got a new tensioner here, our chains, our sprockets for the oil pump, the tensioner for the oil pump, guides, and a new exhaust sprocket. There are three little washers that go on this. There are three little washers that go on the gears that ride on the crankshaft. The first of which goes on this side, and you're going to install this. If you look at this guy, there's a fat side and a short side. You're going to put it like that with the washer on it. Get our washer and our thing on there. Then we need to get our sprocket for our oil pump. New sprocket. It's got this index on it right there at the bottom. It lines up with the index right there. Other washer right there.
Take this to the shark stand.
This sprocket, I'm placing it with the dot on the outside. Up top, we're going to put this swinging tensioner arm on first. Just slides onto the dowel pin. I found the easiest way to get this chain on is to take this exhaust camshaft and unthread it, loop the chain around everywhere but the exhaust cam, put it up over the exhaust cam, and then work it up and into place. I tried to capture it on footage with my arms, but you just can't see worth beans. So once we get this guide on, all of the sprockets on, the chain on, now we're just left with the front guide. Now we're going to put our tensioner on. Sorry, the compressor started running. Here you can see we got the tensioner in place. I'm just going to work the bolts in a little bit. Won't be torquing anything yet, just seating it. This is just to show you guys, you can do this in the car. A lot of the videos on YouTube are out, engine is out of the car. You don't need to pull it out, guys. There's plenty of room. Do not rely on this tool to hold your camshaft while you are torquing it. It is made out of cheap plastic. So here, what I'm doing is I'm using this to apply tension to this sprocket and take all of the slack out of the middle of the timing chain so that most of it gets taken up by the tensioner down here. So I'm gonna have to have a second hand hold this while I torque this and hold this breaker bar. Okay, you can let go. If you look under here, we've got the timing chain all dialed in, everything torqued to spec. We are ready to put the oil pan back on. Then we are also going to put the timing cover on and torque the harmonic balancer on. Here is the new oil pan, brand new. Gonna get this thing lubed up and slap it on. Right Stuff 1 minute gasket maker. This stuff is awesome. This whole tube cost me about $30. I know that sounds like a lot, but it lasts a lot. It makes a lot of gaskets. And then just a cheap little caulking gun makes this work really easy. Okay, we've pulled the pin on our tensioner and the belt now has no slack. We still have our crankshaft up against the alignment tool, and our alignment tools up here are still in. We have our timing cover torqued to spec with the RTV on it. We have our new friction washer on the crankshaft, our last of 3 washers. Also have a new front main seal installed. We're now going to take our harmonic balancer and install it. Now, there are a couple of key features we need to keep in mind when we do this. The first thing is, as we're putting it on, we might have to spin it a little. If you're going to spin it, only spin it clockwise. Now, I'm only spinning clockwise because remember, this crank can still spin in relation to the sprocket. So you want to rotate it into the alignment tool that's back here and still in place. Now you're going to rotate it until you get to the spot right here. There's a hole in the timing chain cover that is threaded, and that threaded hole will receive one of your timing cover bolts, or basically M6 by I believe 125, and it will locate this crank where it's roughly supposed to be. If you've done everything right, that hole is going to line up. There's an open section in the teeth. You're going to go back 20 reluctor teeth back and it'll be marked. And you want that to line up perfectly with this little mark right here. I'll zoom in. So once you have this bolt in, you make sure you put your washer behind the harmonic balancer and you have your locking tool in. Now this locking tool, I'm going to take it out real quick and show you guys. This one is not made out of aluminum. This one is made out of, I believe, either steel. I don't think it's cast. So this one's pretty strong. A lot of the ones I see people using are like anodized aluminum. So I trust that this is going to hold my crank. There is a flat notch section that you saw earlier in the video in the crank. And this is a pin that is resting against it. Now, if I break that thing with the 70 foot-pound of torque and then the additional 90 degrees I have to do, I'll be the guinea pig. A lot of people say not to do it. Some other performance shops I've seen their videos online say there's no big deal, and they use the aluminum one. So the last thing I want to point out about this before we get this bolt torqued is I have a new harmonic balancer bolt. That is because this is a torque to yield bolt, people. Do not reuse the old one. It's not worth breaking it off inside the crankshaft and having to drill it out, or it failing after you've installed it. So toss that guy, say bye, and get yourself a new one. You also need to replace your camshaft bolts. I don't think I said that as I was doing the job, but make sure you get those replaced as well. Okay guys, this is it. Moment of truth. Got our torque wrench. We're gonna go to 70 foot-pounds. At this point, you want to remove your cam tool. Mine's plastic. You will shatter it if those things twist even the slightest bit. There's 70. Okay, I'm gonna put a mark at 0 degrees, and we are going to then rotate that 90. There we go. You can see I hit 90, or 187 foot-pounds of torque. If you look at my mark, we are not far from 90 degrees. So we know the fancy smancy torque wrench did what a little bit of paint does and eyeballing it. So don't be discouraged if you don't have the wrench. You can do it. And on a happier note, she didn't break. Now we can take this out and we are good to go. Boom. What do you think about that? Let's look up top. And there we go, guys. Well, there you have it, people. You can do these timing chains in the car. It ain't too shabby. She's running great. Everything's back together, and that should be all. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if this helped you out.